Welcome to Underworld Tactics, a show on the internet based upon providing tactical information for Warhammer Underworlds. Today we're going to be reviewing the Storm of Celestus, found in the core set of Warhammer Underworlds core set. I'm Thomas, your host, and we're going to take a deep dive into the Storm of Celestus. So let's get started. The Warband consists of 4 members. 3 of them are Stormcast Eternals. One of them is a Gryph-hound named Sleek. Stats are pretty standard for the Stormcast Eternal members. They've got 4 wounds a pop, 3 movement, and a total of 1 defense dice made with shields. The 3 Eternals are armed with Thunderhead Greatbows. What that means is that they're shooting with 3 range attacks that hit with 2 smash and deal 2 wounds. Unfortunately, the Greatbows can only be fired once per round, meaning that you have to do something else if you want to when you activate them after they shoot that bow. Each Stormcast Eternal has a range 1 melee-esque attack. Although there's no melee attacks in this game, it's like melee, but not melee. The Stormcasters are using a variety of body parts to achieve this. Some of them are using a flying kick. Another is using a big boot, a large elbow, suplex off the top ropes, or a big butt, in the case of Drake and Celestus. These butts hit with a variety, some of them using shields or smashes, some of them are using fury, which is the cross swords, and they're all doing 1 to 2 damage. The big butt does the 2 damage, the other attacks are doing 1. The Eternals inspire when they're successfully hitting with their Greatbows, which can only be shot once per turn. So that's 1 shot at inspiration per turn. Once they inspired, we flip them. And you can do a flip. These models gain bonuses while holding objectives primarily, focused on the following: extra attack dice for Melisande, extra reroll on defense for Aphis, and Drake and Celestus can't be driven back if he's standing on an objective. In addition, the 2 fighters gain 1 extra damage to their range 1 attacks, meaning that the boots and the elbows become bigger and stronger. The leader Celestus instead gets an extra defense dice and an extra dice to his range 1 attack. What we haven't mentioned yet is the 4th member of the Warband, Sleek. Sleek the Gryph-hound. Sleek is a unique member in that he is of another species from the Stormcast Eternals. So I believe under their armor they are different species. Sleek is a real beast, too, in both the physical term and in game terms. That means he can't hold objectives, and he can't carry daggers in his mouth while attacking, but what he can't do while those 2 limitations are in effect for him as a beast, he's armed with a beak and terrible claws. Not to mention his big squeak. His beak is a range 1 attack, doing 1 damage. When he hits with his beak, the hits inspire him, netting him an extra movement and extra defense. He already has a prestigious movement of 4, boosting that up to 5 once it's inspired. Sleek can also let out a mighty squeak. This is the squeak. It's a reaction when somebody else decides to charge one of his buddies. If Squeak is within 1 hex of an adjacent friend, and the enemy is within 2 hexes charging, then Sleek Squeak gives his adjacent friends a fair warning, and they get a guard token. This is a powerful buff for anybody that's sitting on an objective, which this Warband will be. With a threat range of 6, you can expect that this Warband will be camping out and playing objectives rather heavily. The Storm of Celestus models have been released from Games Workshop for quite a number of years, repackaged multiple times over the course of their life. Here is Drake and Celestus, the leader of the Warband. Notice his butt on his crossbow gun. That's the butt that's so big. It does 2 damage, being that it's much bigger than everybody else's butt. Games Workshop has gotten a lot of mileage out of these models. They were released in the early phases of the Stormcast Eternals. Here we have Aphis with his Thunderhead Greatbow, painted in a battle damage fashion. He has huge shoulder pads, and I'd say he proportionally is a little out of proportion with the rest of the models in the Warband.
his primary attack is that shoulder pad right there, in the shoulder pad barge. Melisande is the female Stormcast of the Warband. She also has a Thunderhead Greatbow and a Mighty Kick. She also has high heel armor on, which I think is kind of unusual for any person, Stormcast Eternal or otherwise. But her pose is probably the most awesomest of all the Stormcasters. Here we have Sleek, capable of a mighty squeak. Not meek, never weak, always tongue-in-cheek. Solid model, looks great, probably my favorite model of the Warband. However, he kind of looks like he's posing to be in a catalog of some sort. Like the J.C. Penney catalog. A little static for my taste, but solid looking model. Griffhounds are cool.
Squeak! Storm of Celestus' rival deck rivals other decks in equal measure. The Storm of Celestus' rival deck is not to be don't shake a bow at the Storm of Celestus' rival deck. What I wouldn't do is wave a bow in the direction of the Storm of Celestus. Some warbands have rival decks. The Storm of Celestus is no different than them. It consists of 20 cards plus 12 objective cards. There is 17 glory in this Rivals deck. That means it's 1.4 glory per card if you want to get into the averages. There are 4 Surge cards, I'd say, in the objective deck, if I remember right. 4 out of the possible 6 that is allowed. And that's pretty good, because with an Objectives Warband, sometimes you can't be waiting till the end of the power phase to score your objectives. You need to score them right then and there. As far as the Power Deck goes, Power Deck works well for it, but as a starter deck, as this is the first deck that you're going to be introduced to when you start playing this game, if you buy the starter set, which is what I did. So if you follow in my prestigious footsteps, what you're going to find is that the Power Deck is a bit lacking once you get outside of fighting within the starter box set. The deck has a few cards that are kind of confusing too for new players, are situationally useful if you remember to use them during the power steps, such as the cards that say, play this only in your power step, and then in the next activation something happens. As a new player, that can sometimes be a little bit frustrating because you don't remember to do that in a power step until it's too late, or particularly when it's your opponent's power step. Aside from that, I'd say the Power Deck works well enough for the deck. For the Warband. The Warband and the deck work well enough for the models. Overall, the Storm of Celestus is an objective-based warband that holds a dear spot in my heart. I'm not talking objectively here. This is pure passion. I enjoy this warband, or the soft spot comes from the fact that I've played this warband, quite a bit for a long time before I finally moved on to the other warbands. I do feel the warband is lacking a little bit in punch. It's able to play the game very well, but against some aggressive warbands, the warband seems to fall apart rather quickly and almost has to switch gears because it's being pummeled to death. Well, that's it for this episode of Underworld Tactics. Tune in the near future for the next video, taking a dive into the tactics of another warband. I'm your host, Thomas, and I'll see you next time on Underworld Tactics.